Welcome to our final webinar session in our four-part series. Today's session is Techniques for Differentiation in Remote Learning, and we have some expert teachers to share some exciting strategies with you today. My name is Anya Arnold, and I'll be one of the facilitators. And in just a moment, you'll be able to meet the other facilitators and panelists. Just a few notes before we get started. At the bottom of your screen, feel free to use the Q&A option to pose questions and ask questions for our panelists. And at the end of the webinar, during the live Q&A, they will be able to answer those questions for you. You may also use the chat option if you have comments or if you'd like to post a link or a resource that might be helpful to our audience. You can post those there. With that, we will go ahead and get started with our pre-recorded slides, and then we will move into our panelist presentations.
Welcome to the webinar, Techniques for Differentiation in Remote Learning. Today's facilitators are myself, Dr. Hilary McNeil, Coordinator of Clinical Experiences and School Partnerships, Anya Arnold, University Supervisor and Instructor at UMKC and the Institute for Urban Education, and Asha Moore, Dean of Students at the Academy for Integrated Arts, as well as an Institute for Urban Education alum. The webinar format will consist of opening with some clarifying statements, and then we will provide an overview of differentiation in remote learning. We will then move to teacher panelist presentations as they share their wealth of knowledge on differentiation in remote learning. And finally, we will finish with some live question and answer time with the panelists. The clarifying statements that we would like to say at the start of this webinar first include that we recognize remote learning is not easy. We also want to make sure that that you all know that we are not endorsing one approach to differentiation over any of the others. There are multiple ways to differentiate remotely, and so some may work better than others for you. Finally, we believe that differentiation is critical, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of when it happens, where it happens, that teaching and learning need to be differentiated. With that, we will get started with our overview. This quote, "For high quality differentiation in remote learning, we need to focus on learning and not doing." As we ventured into the spring semester this past spring, we were forced into situations of remote learning, and we learned a great deal from that. In many situations, we were focused on getting the students to do something rather than to learn something. So it's important for us to think about differentiation and to think about students learning and not just doing. Zaretta Hammond, the author of Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, says that in remote learning, we need to ask, what does it mean to inspire thinking? We need to foster learning where students are the co-developers and ask them things like, what will get you to show up to remote learning? Outlined by Carol Tomlinson, an expert in differentiation, comes this graphic, and it demonstrates how differentiation is initiated by teacher responses to learners' needs. Those learners' needs are guided by the teacher's mindsets and guiding principles. And that differentiation can come in multiple ways, including content, process, product, affect, and the learning environment. No matter how the teacher chooses to differentiate, all of those decisions should be made in accordance with the student, and that would include their readiness, their interest, and their learning profile. And there are multiple ways to change and use instructional strategies to differentiate, and also to consider ways to differentiate content, process, product, and environment. And we will be able to learn some of those approaches today. In order to differentiate according to the students' needs and interests and lives, we must know our students. It's critical that we use formative assessments in remote learning to really get to know our students, which can be more difficult remotely than in class circumstances. As it states here, formative assessments are anything that gives insight about the students. That could include emotionally or academically. This could include one-on-one check-ins, quick writes, quizzes or tests, discussions, or even body language. We can think of differentiation as students learning the same content with voice and choice. Areas to differentiate in are learning the content, the process of learning, the products to demonstrate learning, and the environment in which learning takes place. I'm now going to turn to Anya, who is going to touch on each of these 4 areas for differentiation.
The first area for differentiation we will look at is content. When we differentiate content, we are considering how we adapt the ways we give access to what we want students to learn. Some examples include providing videos for visual learners or even individualized instructional videos based on students' needs. Teachers can also provide text and reading materials to students that are tailored to their reading level. This can be accessible through Google Classroom. Additionally, teachers can offer choices, flexible materials, and flexible time allotment when teaching content. For students who need extra support, teachers can utilize a variety of online platforms such as Zoom and Google Meet to reteach individual students or small groups. The second area of differentiation we will look at is process. When we plan differentiation with a focus on process, we keep in mind that students have the same learning goal or objective, but each student's journey may look different as to how they reach those goals. Tomlinson refers to process as a sense-making process. Some ways we can vary the sense-making process is to allow different lengths of time for completion or different tiers of activities based on the skill level of the students. We can also utilize graphic organizers or additional learning activities that may include simulations or interactive resources. Additionally, some students may benefit from short, targeted practice. Lastly, collaboration is a key component when considering differentiating process. One way we can ensure students are collaborating even though physically distant is to use shared interactive online documents. Product is an additional key area in differentiation. Products are essential because they represent the skills, ideas, and connections students have made during the learning process. Here are a few examples to consider when planning ways to make sharing students' learning meaningful in an online environment. Students can show understanding through assignments that include presentation, video, essay, and audio. Products may include group or individual work, virtual collaboration through a shared learning environment, and/or choice boards where students get to select the best way to demonstrate their learning. It's also important to consider how students will receive feedback in an effective, timely manner, and how students are self-assessing during the learning process. The final area we will discuss today is how to differentiate the environment for remote learning. A critical component to consider is culture and how we continue to focus on culturally relevant teaching strategies regardless of the situation we may be in this coming year. Gloria Latson-Billings says it best when she states, "We must insert education into culture instead of culture into education." What better opportunity to practice this as students will likely be learning in their own home environments. Teachers can consider ways to integrate materials that are relevant to home and culture as they plan their online lessons. Some other ideas include supporting students in finding a positive learning space in their homes and helping to set up routines, organization, and time management through the use of calendars, checklists, and timers. We also know that students need interaction with their teachers, so it is vital that we balance live interactions along with self-paced learning. This includes small group settings with the use of online breakout groups, whole group settings, and regular check-ins with individual students. Now we have the opportunity to hear from our panel of amazing teachers and their strategies for differentiation in remote learning.
Our first panelist today is Dr. Jessica Lafollette. Jessica Lafollette has been a middle school gifted education facilitator in Kansas City, Kansas for almost 20 years. She earned her PhD from UMKC in 2019 while researching the effects of state-level gifted education policies on classroom practices of teachers serving gifted learners from diverse backgrounds. She has taught graduate courses in curriculum design at UMKC and in characteristics of the gifted at Emporia State University.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Lafollette, and I'm here to talk about how to differentiate a Google quiz. This is a digital solution using something that's free and that most people already kind of understand how to use. I also suggest using lots of other tools in addition to this, but this is kind of a basic starter level differentiation, and this is about differentiating the process. We're not changing the content, we're not changing the end product, but we're changing the middle part on how learners get there. If you want to access the form that I'm going to be showing you today, I've got a bit.ly link here. If you just type in bit.ly/diffquiz2020, that'll make a copy in your own Google Drive of this form. So first of all, here's a plain old Google form quiz, which I think most everybody probably knows how to do and has seen before. It automatically grades it for you. There are multiple choice questions. I made this back in April before I knew how to differentiate a Google quiz. And here's one that's been differentiated. You can see the difference here is in the sections. So on this basic level of a differentiated quiz, I've got 4 sections. The first section is just your instructions, name, and a starter question. And if kids get the starter question correct, they get to skip all the way to the main assignment, which is section 4, and then demonstrate mastery on the main assignment. If they don't get the starter question right, it allows them to jump to it. It forces them to jump directly to section 2, where there's some more instruction and another practice problem. If they get that one right, they move on to the main assignment and skip section 3. If they still don't get a question right here, then they can have even more instruction and some more detailed examples of how to do it, and then one more practice question. That's the basic thing about a differentiated quiz, is that there are separate sections. Not every student is going to do every section. And in order to make a new section in the Google Forms, if you didn't already know, it's right here. It's this little button for adding a section. And then the other key to doing it is to telling the form where you want the student to go based on their answer. It only works for multiple choice and drop down, unfortunately, but I'll show you what it looks like. You type in your starter question, and then you type in your answers, and then you hit this little snowman 3 dots button here, and it allows you to go to section based on answer. So you put a little check mark next to go to section based on answer, and then, like I've told it here, I want everyone to go on to section 2 instruction unless they have marked the correct answer. They mark the correct answer, they go right on to the main assignment. So that's the basics of how to create a Google form that is differentiated. You can put whatever you want in the additional instruction cards, and you really know your kids best, and you know how to decide what is most interesting to them, what will be most engaging, and who's probably going to need what kind of differentiated level of instruction. But the key is they all get to the same place in the end, and they don't necessarily have to follow the same path to get there. And we would call this the skip pattern if you were doing some kind of research survey or whatever. It's basically embedding a skip pattern within your quiz. So again, this is like the basic way to do it, but I've given you a copy at that bit.ly link of this one that's like next level differentiation, which I really love. This is even more fun. It's got 7 sections, and it's the same at the beginning, but within each section, there's also some did you know or click here to learn more things. So for example, I want students to think about Pythagoras as not the only person who ever came up with that a squared plus b squared is c squared. I want them to think about the multicultural history. So I've given them a link to click on, and then I asked them a question about who do you think should be really getting more credit for this important theorem. This is an optional question, but it'll be easy for me to see in the responses, like who took the time to think about it? Who actually clicked on this and gave me an answer? It's optional, but it allows our high ability learners to go deeper. Here's section 2. They would come to only if they were interested in synesthesia. I know I've got some kids who love psychology, so they might find it fascinating that Pythagoras has synesthesia, and it's kind of one of the things he was known for. And even if they needed the additional instruction, that doesn't mean they're not interested in learning a little bit more or some other kind of additional background. So they could click on this and it would take them to section 2. Otherwise, the quiz is the same, except for at the very end, I really wanted to show you guys the bonus level thing. If you throw in a bonus level for getting a problem right, those kids will feel like they've unlocked something special. And you can also put something a little harder in there that you might not expect everyone to know how to do, but you'll be surprised at the kids that do figure it out. So I definitely recommend throwing in an extra section with a bonus level. And I hope you enjoy using this strategy, and I hope it takes your Google quizzes up a notch.
All right, thank you, Jessica. That differentiated quiz will be very helpful to many, I'm sure. And I also like how you are stressing the importance to challenge our higher level learners as well. Oftentimes with differentiation, we think about those students who are struggling. All right, on to our next panelist is Kenise Salinas-Willich. Kenise is the principal of New Chelsea Elementary in Kansas City, Kansas School District. She has been committed to excellence for herself and others for over 22 years. She has a master's degree in counseling, as well as currently writing her doctoral dissertation in the area of teacher preparedness in the urban core. She truly loves her career as an elementary principal as she gets a chance to teach what she has learned, inspire others who want to see our future succeed, and build long-lasting friendships with our students, staff, and families. She prides herself in thinking creatively and outside the box.
Hi, my name is Kenise Salinas, and I am a principal in the Kansas City, Kansas School District. I've been asked to talk a little bit about what differentiation is and how will it look this fall during online learning. I wanted to do a brief 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm going to keep a timer here so I don't go over. Little discussion about what differentiation is, why is it important, and what we're going to do differently here at New Chelsea to keep students engaged. To me, differentiation is the practice of meeting the needs of all students in whatever capacity that is that helps our students to learn. Not all of our students learn the same. Many of our students learn at a different rate and a different speed. Some need visual, some need written work. Some love to read and some don't love to read. And so this year, I am thinking outside the box. I had talked to a few people on a webinar a few months ago or a month ago in regards to an idea that I had over the summer, because I knew that what we did ending the school year worked for some but did not work for all. And so this summer I had teachers pitch me an idea of what their summer school online learning would look like. And I got things from electrical engineering, we got crime lab investigations, the teachers just thought outside of the box in a unique way that made learning fun. So this year I was approached by a company who sells high-end technology products, and they are promoting a camera that is a 6-lens camera, and it's considered a 360-degree view. What teachers will be able to do with this camera is they will be able to live stream as well as teach in their classroom from a 360-degree view. So instead of sitting at your computer or being stuck to Zoom, our teachers will be able to record and stream in their classroom at any place in their classroom, be it up front, at the board, at the reading table. And the piece that I'm going to add this year is I am going to ask teachers to think outside the box, and I want them to have a project-based learning project week to week. It can be extended for a multitude of weeks. But every teacher will have to go outside their classroom, and as long as they're safe. I would like our teachers to give our students an experience this year. They're going to have a project, and the kids are going to have to answer high-end questions. They will have to use their inquiry skills. They will have to travel with the teacher on this journey of learning instead of being in 4 walls for multiple hours. So my teachers are going to be asked to look at the standards, pitch me an idea from the standards that correlate, and that the kids are going to have to answer a variety of questions. So, for example, if the standard talked about design, or I know that we have some that do like dimensions. We could take the building across the street. We could look at creating a new space, and the kids will have to come up with an idea of how to utilize this building, and looking at the dimensions and the square footage, materials, and they can go out into breakout rooms and do a lot of the work as teams. But the teacher is going to come up with a lesson plan that gets the kids excited and ignited by using this 360-degree camera that will allow for her to capture her own learning, to take pictures, to record, to upload, and just give the kids a sense as if they were right there in the classroom with her. And so I don't have all the answers to this yet. It's in the planning stages. I am going to pitch my own idea to my teachers tomorrow on a Zoom that we are going to have in regards to what will learning look like. But I want to invest some different technology with my teachers, and to give them an opportunity to think outside the box, to be creative, that will hopefully ignite students and keep them engaged. So that's my idea for differentiation. That's my idea for something creative. And I hope I can come back on here to tell you how it's going, what we've had to do to change or to adapt. But for now, it's actually just using a piece of technology that my teachers have not had a chance to use, and it allows them to be free from their seat and from their desk and from the computer, and to teach with freedom, either live stream, recorded, inside and outside of the classroom. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Kenise. We have 2 more panelists, and both of these panelists will be sharing live. So the first panelist that will be sharing live is Danielle Parker. Danielle Parker has a passion and desire to create authentic learning opportunities in the classroom. She strives to provide an environment where students feel loved, safe, and encouraged each day. Danielle graduated from Missouri State University in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in early childhood education. She recently graduated with a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. She has taught first grade for the past 3 years and is now transitioning into the third grade classroom this fall. We will also hear from panelist Ashley Gann. Ashley Gann is a 6th grade ELA teacher as well as an instructional coach at Lincoln College Prep Middle School in Kansas City, Missouri. She holds a bachelor's degree in elementary education and a master's degree in urban teacher leadership, both from UMKC, and is now on track to complete her education specialist degree in educational administration. She is entering her 5th year of teaching for Kansas City Public Schools and her first year serving as the instructional coach. Prior to teaching at the middle school, she was an elementary teacher for 3 years at the 3rd and 4th grade levels.
Alrighty, so hello everyone, and thanks for your time today. I wanted to quickly share the value of small groups in differentiated learning in the classroom. So we know that virtual learning has obviously been a big change, to say the least. And with that, moving into the fall and starting a new school year, it's more important than ever to be able to break down the groups of kids that we're working with and really focus in on their individual needs, like differentiation says. Meeting the needs of students isn't going to happen, unfortunately, with whole group Zoom lessons. And so I just wanted to provide a couple of examples of ways that you can differentiate in your school or in your classroom that would allow for students to get the learning that they need. So the first thing is small groups and virtual learning. Areas of concern, small groups are already somewhat difficult in person, trying to organize and find out where kids are. It's hard to know where students should be placed, and it potentially can create more work for teachers working from home or, doing any type of virtual learning. The benefits, though, it gives you a closer opportunity to learn about your students and what they need. You're able to meet the students at a different level. You can reteach and scaffold, and it just makes the work feel a lot more meaningful. Distance learning feels very distant, and I think it's important to try and connect with the kids as often as we can, not only academically, but on a social and emotional level as well. So with that, I just provided 2 quick examples of how you can incorporate small groups through Zoom lessons or other platforms. The first one would be an example of a small group right after a whole group lesson. So for example, if you had a 9 to 9:30 ELA lesson, depending on the size of your class, it could be the entire group or half the group. And then following right after that, instead of having to have the kids log off and then join a small group later, you can split your group into different sections like you see on the screen. So group A, that could be on a Monday where they're extending beyond the lesson if they're, more advanced. Group B could be on Tuesday and they're scaffolding, just reteaching and trying to kind of bring them to the content from where they are. And then group C and D, depending on what framework your students are aligned in, you can use review and additional practice on those other days. But basically it just gives you an opportunity to allow your students to be able to meet with you on a smaller scale, and you're able to get more insight on what they know and what they've learned from the lesson before and beyond. And then after, our second option is an ELA lesson, quote unquote office hours, but still teaching that same lesson. And then, for a couple hours or however long you have within your schedule, students can log back into the Zoom call and you can answer questions, you can screencast and, provide examples or anything that you need for that student. But it just gives them an opportunity to get help from you in real time rather than an email or a text or something less personal. In addition, outside of academic content, there's lots of ways you can differentiate your procedures to be able to meet the needs of your families and your students. One really strong emphasis that you can make is making family connections. So just finding ways for you to be available for families who maybe don't work a 9 to 5, or they have to do their students' schoolwork with them in the evenings or another time. If you feel comfortable sharing your personal contact info, we all get to choose whether or not we do that. But if not, there's Google Phone that allows you to create a phone number within your zip code, and then you can have parents send you text messages that way. You can use Remind. Our class last year used a Marco Polo so that the kids could stay connected. So parents were downloading it on their phone, and then they sent video messages to each other, and that's an app that's on the Google App Store or the Apple Store. Another option or another thing that you can do is identifying students' social and emotional needs. So for example, if you have a student, and I'm working with younger kids, so this is a different example, but if they are an only child and maybe don't have any socialization, finding a friend in class and seeing if they're able to pop onto a Zoom class before or after the call and just give them 5 to 7 minutes to say hi to a friend. Again, engagement can be really challenging, and having incentive opportunities. We don't have a prize box in virtual learning, but you can, use Zooming with friends as an opportunity, just have some time to talk and chat. Having class sharing time where kids can bring an item, or you do theme days, or Pictionary. We played that a lot last year, where we're writing in the chat and giving them a word, and then I taught the first graders, which was challenging, but taught them how to share their screen so that they could draw the picture, and they really seemed to enjoy that. Overall, it's really just meeting families where they are, doing what we can within our means, but also not putting too much pressure on ourselves to, be there for everyone and do everything. We can do what we can, and we can focus our energy on the places that will provide the most support and really give kids what they need academically and just well-rounded, just to grow and become well-rounded individuals. So thank you for your time.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Danielle, for that great information. So as you've heard today, the importance of communication with students and their families is going to be crucial in making this virtual learning process successful. So I am going to share my screen with you as well. And as I do that, I just want to remind us to keep in mind the fact that our goal should always be to ensure that student interest, voice, and choice are integrated into all pieces of this process. So what you see on your screen is a resource that allows for these components to be present in your virtual classrooms. This is something you may have seen or even used before as an all-encompassing space known as a hyperdoc, which allows for independent student pacing and collaboration and interest in the learning process. In short, a hyperdoc is a Google or Word document which has inserted hyperlinks to different online tools. So this is a resource for both students and teachers to use at their own discretion based on the needs of learners within a space. A key component to keep in mind is that learners can progress at their own speed, and students are able to determine the workload they can handle. So for example, this is something that would be assigned at the start of the week after the completion of a topical mini lesson, with the turn-in date of Friday, and then students have the opportunity to do what they can at their own pace. So what this template is in front of you is a basic hyperdoc template with some ideas for each component. So I want to provide some background on how this correlates with other lesson design and expectations that you may have seen. So you'll notice there are different features within a hyperdoc, but the key is to have a place for students to access the content, how and when they desire. This can be used across grade levels and content areas as teachers see fit within their classrooms. And you can choose to use all or some of the features depending upon your desired outcomes as a teacher. So as you can see, as you progress through this, the Engage, Explore, and Explain sections encompass that do now, the check-in, the modeling portion or the direct instruction that you would provide to students. And then as you go through, the apply and the share would then allow them that independent work time, that guided practice with you, and then that collaboration with peers as well will come into that space. And then provides another alternative online tool that I use with students to really capture both the academic and the personal needs for my students. So I was able to ask those social emotional questions in a way that was authentic, that provided me feedback before I even jumped into what the lesson was going to be. So that provided a space for both of those. And then again, the teach and learn is that model or that direct instruction. So you'll notice again, the hyperlinks are embedded into this document. This is a Prezi that I chose to use with my students that again gave them the discretion of moving through it and completing this at their pace or staying with me during that direct instruction piece. And it gave them an opportunity to really make the learning their own. I gave them the graphic organizer here, but they also had the opportunity to open up their own document and they could type their notes as they see fit, as long as it applied to their best learning style for them. So as I progressed through this HyperDoc, the engagement activity again goes back to the engage with the learning. So I haven't quite released them to do their independent work. I'm still guiding them through this process. And if you notice here, the link will take them to the poem in a video format. So some students are more comfortable listening to these as opposed to reading them. So I want to provide that opportunity for them to do both. They already had a copy of that poem, but then they were able to listen to it. And again, this is what they already know. What are you bringing to the conversation based on what we've learned? And then that can guide the lesson into the independent practice and then allow me to pull those students into those small groups, as Danielle mentioned, to work with them on what they need. And then we go to the independent application, which is where the bulk of that work comes in for students owning the learning. So again, whether they've listened to the content or they've read the content or I've met with them, this is where that check for understanding and that independent practice would apply. And then the last component and really the highest leverage piece is the share portion. So again, we've got links to Padlet where students will reflect on their learning and also provide a space for students to collaborate. So peers are able to see the Padlet and respond to the answers that are posted. And it also allows me to see the students thinking. For example, on Padlet, they have to type in their knowledge. They have to type in those answers. Flipgrid is another component that allows students to record themselves with the answer. And again, when you incorporate that piece, you're allowing students who may not be as comfortable typing or voicing their answers in writing, they can record that in a video. And I can also allow students either for me to only see it or students themselves can see and respond. So as you work through the HyperDoc template, again, you'll notice I did not incorporate all the sections, but I really tailored this to what I knew that my students needed at the time and what was going to be best for their learning. So hopefully that is something that you can apply to your classroom as well.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you to all of the panelists who participated and shared today. We're going to move right into our question and answer portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the question and answer. I do have a couple that I was going to pull out and make sure you all knew that those were answered. Someone asked Jessica for access to the bit.ly, but she shared that you just needed to make a copy, and that worked for me. So hopefully that worked for you. There was a question about how expensive the 360 camera was. That Sanish shared, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today, but if there are questions specifically for her, we will make sure we get those to her. But there was a response in the chat, and I also put that response in the question and answer. And then lastly, Ashley, there was a question about if you had to make those, or if they were already ready-made, or if you have to create the documents that you shared. So could you answer that, and then we'll go into question and answer.
Yes, definitely. So there is a resource with HyperDoc templates that are available, and there are some pre-made. They are specific to content, not necessarily specific to grade level. So you can access the template and the content, and then you go in and manipulate those different pieces to tailor it to your classroom.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to pose a question, and then panelists, just feel free to answer those questions that you feel that you want to respond to, and then we will move along. And then again, please post any questions that you have in the chat. The first question is, how have you seen differentiation benefit students you have worked with?
I can speak to this question. I have found that students really have a chance to relate with the content and have more exposure to opportunities for new learning when it's differentiated and really captures their needs. So when we talk about differentiation within the classroom or within a virtual setting, we are really catering and recognizing that students all don't learn the same way. And for that purpose, they then engage so much better, and they really want to engage with the new learning. It's not a process of I have to, it's an I want to. And so they really have jumped onto those new learning pieces, even in a new environment as well.
I want to agree with what Ashley said, and then also just add that the times when they get the most engaged is when you have figured out how to build that relationship with them ahead of time and really understand what their individual needs are. And when they recognize that you're doing it on purpose because you care about them, there's that aspect of caring about their needs and then of knowing them really well. And then I would also just caution everyone to avoid the word extra and avoid the word more, because no kid or adult wants to do extra or more work. But if you frame it as different work just for you, or I knew you would love this, it's a little different than what someone else is doing, but I think you're really gonna like it. If you've got that established relationship, they eat it up and it's awesome, so.
All right, our next question is, what obstacles does remote learning present for differentiation, and how can we overcome them? I'll start actually. I'll speak to this one, and then please feel free to chime in. So one of the obstacles that I've experienced, that I've seen, is just participation levels. And even when you have something scheduled, like thinking of the small groups or the one-on-one, it's the obstacle of getting the students to participate. And I think at this time, teachers will have to work even harder to really get creative. And I really think about building trust and then also relationships. I know teachers already, I remember working so hard to build relationships with my students, and I feel in a remote setting, you have to work probably even harder, especially if there's students that you don't have a relationship with, because it's important for them to know that you have their best interests at hand. And so this question reminded me of a teacher that I was working with this past summer, and she was working one-on-one with a student and really was engaging, making sure her participation, and she was on a call with the student, and she really needed to set some scheduled time. And so she told the student to, no, take me to your dad right now. I want to talk to him, and I want to make sure that we set this time together. And so that just really stuck with me, because you know, teachers you're going to have to feel comfortable with thinking about, okay, how can I make sure I'm engaging with my students, making sure they attend the one-on-one sessions, making sure that they adhere to a schedule, working with students to set a schedule, and even the families having calls together and making sure that that time is set so that it's beneficial for students. So I just wanted to share that when you think about obstacles, because it's not always easy. So thinking about ways to be creative and making sure that the buy-in and engagement is there from the student and from the family. Did anyone have anything to add? All right. Well,
I would add, sorry, Asha, I would just add that we wouldn't have gotten into teaching if we expected to have an easy job, right? We all know it's going to be challenging, whether we're in the classroom or out of the classroom. And the people I've seen who did the best with it in the spring were the people who just like kept a positive attitude and kept problem solving, kept reaching out to kids and making sure they were working on those things. So I think that's my only thing about the obstacles is keep that positive attitude and keep remembering that you got into this because you love kids and you want to make a difference no matter how you can. So
yes, that's a great reminder. Thank you. And Jessica, it looks like these questions might be for you. It says, for providing gifted services online in Kansas, what would you suggest as a platform? And then what other gifted suggestions for online?
okay.
And if anybody else knows, please feel to add, but it sounded like maybe those questions were for you.
I'll try to be quick. In Kansas, we have to be really careful because we are mandated through the IEP process. So no matter what services you provide, they need to be consistent with what the IEP already says, or you have to modify or alter your IEP. In Missouri, you have a little bit more flexibility, and yet DESE also has some recommendations and requirements as well. So I would look to state leaders first and make sure you're following what the requirements are. And then I would say be as flexible and as free as you can and let the students lead you. The things that they're already comfortable with, go with that. If the other teachers are using Zoom, start on Zoom. If the other teachers are using Google Meet, use that. But allow them to direct you and allow them to inspire your own creativity to get outside that box of maybe just the Google thing. Maybe there are other things like Flipgrid and Padlet and Nearpod and all those other cool tools that if you've got a small group are easier to implement. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Our next question is, differentiation often seems like a daunting task for teachers. What advice can you give teachers to take small steps towards differentiation in remote settings?
I think going back to the obstacles piece, we really have to focus on leveraging student voices. We have to build those relationships, and that's going to be the first and foremost thing that you have to do each time, no matter if it's virtual or if it's in person. Just continue to remind yourself that the student voices are going to be the most powerful. Collaboration, making sure that you recognize their interest and recognizing that their differences are unique and can be leveraged in the classroom, as opposed to thinking of it as a burden. So really leveraging those voices and helping that to, or helping you develop those pieces of your lessons in the learning space and the community with them and for them.
I also think just starting small kind of gives you an opportunity to feel out what you're able to do and what you're comfortable doing and what will work for your situation. So, you can differentiate on a smaller scale just by, if you're doing a math lesson, providing another, you can provide like a tricky question or, a scaffold option if the student finds the example from the problem a little too challenging, and then addressing the highest need first. So figuring out what your needs are in your group and then trying to address them on that scale before breaking down into 1,000 different groups. It can be overwhelming. So just taking your time and really just focusing on one aspect at a time will really help you out.
Thank you. I'm going to go back and ask a question from the chat. And the question from the chat is, are there any ways that I can use differentiation in real world service learning projects with technology during COVID-19? And I do have a response from this, but I'll let the panelists respond if they have something first. Okay. Oh, go ahead. No.
I'll just say independent studies and small group studies and challenging them to solve a problem that they really care about. I don't think you can start something like that day one or September 8th or whatever we're talking about is day one. You need to build that relationship first, find what their interests are, then challenge them to solve a real world problem. And that's all I'll say about that. But it's totally possible. And that's where you're going to get the most engagement, is when they're choosing to solve something they care about.
Yes, absolutely. And then actually, this is some of the work that the teachers did during summer school, because during the remote learning setting, we did not do our project work that we typically do during the school year. And we used the project approach. And so in summer school, we wanted to stay true to what we believe. And so we wanted to make sure that the students were engaged in project work. And so since we weren't in school, the teachers didn't have the questions, because usually it's really you know, they usually have the students ask questions and build, and based on the students' interests, then they develop the project. Well, the teachers came with an idea for the project, but they really found a lot of success with the project work that they did during summer school, because the students really bought into it and they were just as engaged. And so some of the things that our teachers did was they did read alouds to engage the students in that work and bring in the content that way. Some students, the older students, read information outside of the actual virtual meeting time. And then also too, the teachers brought in field experts. And so they invited other people and members of the community to speak to the topics that they engaged in. They also took students on virtual field trips. And many of the topics were centered around COVID-19. Some of them were around just who are we, like who am I, and then how, like identity. There were also topics about COVID-19 and the science behind germs. And so there was a science focus. And then another teacher went a different direction, and she did a project on amusement parks. And so the students actually in the end built their own theme park, or virtually they, you know, put together their ideas, and she took them throughout the weeks. They had to map out what they wanted that to look like. So it can look various ways, and there's definitely things that you can do. And I would say it's really beneficial because the students really are excited. And even in the classroom, we find that our project time is the time that students are really excited to learn. It looks like we have time for maybe one more question. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can pull one from the chat. Okay, it says, have you used grouping in breakout rooms in virtual learning to help student engagement and differentiation?
I can speak to this in the spring. Very similar to, like you mentioned, the cake in groups. The breakout rooms did provide a space for students to collaborate, and it was very similar to in the classroom. So being an ELA teacher, I was able to assign roles, and what they did was they had a shared document. And the shared document was for the whole class, but then they focused on their roles within that breakout room. So I was able to, in Zoom, you can hop into different breakout rooms, but then I could see their work that was happening on the shared document. And you assign that, you can pre-assign those breakout rooms and allow for student collaboration and student conversation. And then they would put that learning and that knowledge on a shared document. So yes, it is very much possible to engage them in those small groups.
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Asha, for facilitating our question and answer time. And thank you to the panelists for your wisdom. And it sounds like we have lots of people that will take things away from this webinar and use it in classrooms and in their schools. I do want to finish with one quote. I'm going to share my screen. A little something to remember as we leave this webinar. Lisa Westman, author of Student-Driven Differentiation, says that there's only way that you can mess differentiation up, and that is knowing that your students need something different, but not trying anything to meet their needs. So just remember that the only way that you can mess differentiation up is by not trying. So we all know that we are different, we learn differently, and our students learn differently. And so our attempts are going to be beneficial. And then just a final slide, a couple more resources. We will be sending all this information out to you. So as you leave today, if you missed something either in the chat or any resources someone shared, you will be receiving that in an email, and then the recording will also be available on our website. So with that said, we thank you for participating today to the attendees, and we thank you to the panelists for sharing today. Thank you.